What has been some of your biggest challenges and, leading up to the election?
So we started early on identifying some of the things that we needed to do to make sure that we were ready for November. In fact, that's the name of the task force that we launched. We called it the Ready for November Task Force. And we brought together elections officials from all over Ohio, urban areas, rural areas, everything in between. We heard from experts that shared their advice on things that we needed to do, everything from public health experts to elections officials from other states to cybersecurity experts. We heard from leaders in Ohio's minority community about specific concerns related to them. We worked really with a whole array of professionals, including, by the way, we worked with the team from Cedar Point, the amusement park company, because we work really hard to avoid lines, but we know that in some cases lines are going to be a part of the process. And so we wanted to hear from the experts at line management to make sure that we could create that safe social distancing and also keep lines moving as quickly as we could. Now, as a result of that, there were several main things that we focused on. Poll worker recruitment was one of them. We needed to make sure that we had a strong force of Ohioans ready to go. I'm happy to report that we've had great progress on that. The bare minimum we needed was 37,000. That's just to have enough people to open 4,000 polling locations on Election Day. But of course, bare minimum isn't good enough in this scenario. So we set the goal of 55,000 so that we could have that ready, trained reserve force in case there are folks that call off work. Happy to report that we've already had over 50,000 Ohioans sign up to be poll workers. One of the other things, and by the way, we're still recruiting at voteohio.gov for people to sign up to be poll workers. They'll get paid for their work. They'll get trained by their Board of Elections, assigned to a polling location, probably pretty close to home. And again, the pay is okay, but what's really important is you're doing an important patriotic service for Ohio and for your fellow Ohioans to make sure that you've got an opportunity for free and fair elections. So poll worker recruitment's been a big focus. We also were really focused on getting the word out and making sure that we can encourage early and absentee voting. And so to that end, I sent out one of these to every registered voter in the state. This is an absentee ballot request form. All 8 million registered voters in the state, over 8 million, received one of those, and we've seen an amazing response. In fact, 2.5 million Ohioans have already requested an absentee ballot. Here it is in mid-October. Just to give you a perspective, in 2016, it was only 1.2 million at this point, and so we're obviously way over that. And so we're seeing a lot of Ohioans that are taking advantage of early voting and absentee voting. Early voting is rocking and rolling as well. I mean, it's been really awesome to see people so excited to participate in early voting. And we announced that in the first week of early voting, which started October 6th, we saw close to 200,000 Ohioans participate. That is 3 times the number that we saw at this point in 2016. And so it's just awesome. And the reason why that's so important is that when we can help folks right now cast their ballot, that's fewer people that we need to serve on Election Day, and that helps reduce lines at the polls and reduce crowding and that kind of thing. Of course, one of the other big focuses is on the health scenario. We knew that we needed to work with our boards of elections to create a healthy environment at every polling location where people felt welcome and where they could feel comfortable going in to vote. And so we worked with the United States Centers for Disease Control as well as the Ohio Department of Health, and we issued a 61-point checklist for all the things they need to do and are required to do to create that safe and healthy environment at the polls. We've mobilized massive quantities of personal protective equipment, masks and shields, signage for all the doors so that people know to wear a mask when they come inside and to keep 6 feet apart. Of course, hand sanitizer and wipes for all the machines. And so what I've been telling Ohioans is if you feel safe going to the grocery store, you should feel safe coming to your polling location. And that's exactly what we're doing. Branson, one of the other things that we've really been focused on is combating false information. There is so much confusing and false information out there about elections, and it's really something that we have to combat every day to make sure people have the facts. And whether it comes from our foreign adversaries that are trying to confuse people by launching these social media campaigns, or whether it comes from our own domestic American politicians that share things that maybe aren't true, or even people that are well-intentioned but just misinformed that spread these rumors around, it's important for Ohioans to have the facts. And that's why we've worked with leaders in the community all throughout Ohio to recognize disinformation and to report it to us using report@ohiosos.gov. We've already been able to run down some of these things and refer them to law enforcement when we've seen efforts to intentionally suppress the vote. That's something that we take very seriously. We never tolerate that. And that's something that we've been able to root out because of our very aggressive efforts at that. And so, with all of these different things that we're doing, I'm confident that our bipartisan county boards of elections are ready for this election, and we're going to have record turnout, and Ohioans are going to have the chance to make their voice heard in record numbers, and that's something I think is really exciting.
Frank, you talked about the absentee ballots and a lot of false things out there. How can you answer or calm the nerves of folks wondering if their ballot will count? If I put it in the mailbox, would it actually get there? If I put it in the drop box, and which drop box, and where is the drop box in each county? Please answer some of those questions.
Yeah, so it's important to start with the facts. The best antidote to a lie is the truth, and a lot of it. And unfortunately, there are a lot of lies out there right now. The fact is, you can trust voting by mail in Ohio. That's nothing new. Ohioans, millions of Ohioans have voted by mail really for close to 20 years. And it's really unfortunate that there are some out there telling people to be afraid of voting by mail, because it's a great way to cast your ballot. In fact, that's what my wife Lauren and I did. We put our ballot, we sat there at our kitchen table and filled out our ballots over the weekend. We dropped them in the mailbox. And then one of the really cool things that a lot of people don't realize is that you can track your ballot. Now, a lot of us have ordered something online, and you can track it when you order something online, so you know when it's going to come to your front porch. Just like with that, you can track your ballot by going to voteohio.gov/track. And when you do so, you can see that it's arrived at the Board of Elections. You can have that confidence of knowing that your vote will be counted and your voice will be heard. We've also done some work with the U.S. Postal Service. I serve as the co-chair of the National Secretaries of State Elections Committee. And so we convened a bipartisan group of elections officials from around the country to meet with the United States Postmaster General and to give him those tough questions that we had to ask. And I'm happy to say that their answers were reassuring, but it's up to us to hold them accountable and make sure they deliver on those promises. Some of the things that the United States Postal Service has promised to do is, for example, they said all elections mail will be treated like first-class mail. And so this is important. This is that official elections mail logo. It's got the swoosh with the stars on it, and it says elections mail. Any piece of mail that has that logo on it receives special status from the United States Postal Service. They assured us that they were going to keep the sorting operations in Ohio instead of, in some cases where they'd been shipping mail out of state, like our friends up in Toledo, their mail had been shipped to Detroit, and that was costing a couple extra days in the processing. I know in some cases in Northeast Ohio, mail had been shipped out to Pittsburgh for processing, or down in Southwest Ohio over the line as well. And so keeping it in Ohio helps speed the process up. One of the other things that the Postal Service promised to do is do what they call an all-clear procedure, where every night they go through their sorting facility. These are these big plants where they sort all the mail, and they would have a uniformed postal inspector going through and making sure that anything that has that official elections mail logo on it is out the door and not stuck in the process. And then one of the other things that the Postal Service is doing is they have created local relationships. The Postal Service is a huge organization full of a lot of really hardworking people that are very dedicated to their mission, but it all comes down to people, right? And so creating that local relationship where your local elections director at your Board of Elections gets to know the local postmaster, and they exchange cell phone numbers so they can call each other on the weekend and deconflict any kind of problems that come up. We're seeing that happening all over the state. And so again, voting by mail is a great way to vote. It's the easiest way to vote. It's unfortunate that some people have spread a bunch of fear and misinformation that's causing people to distrust mail. And that's why in some cases people are making trips down to the Board of Elections to drop off their ballot, when really the easiest way to do it is to simply make the trip to the end of your driveway or to the mailbox down the street, the blue box, that there's over 10,000 of those in Ohio, and simply mail in your absentee ballot. Now, as it relates to drop boxes, here's what the law says in Ohio. It says that there's 3 ways to return an absentee ballot. I'm not a lawyer, but I've got some great ones that work with me. And so in the law, it lays out very clearly, here are the 3 ways you can return an absentee ballot. The first one, and the preferred one, is to mail it in. That's the way, again, that we just talked about. Most people do it. But there are 2 other ways that you can return an absentee ballot. You can personally deliver it to the director of the Board of Elections. That's quoting right out of Ohio's law. Or you can have a family member personally deliver it to the director of the Board of Elections. And so to make that easier than it's ever been, I directed every county Board of Elections to establish a secure 24/7 drop box there at the county BOE so that people can come anytime, day or night, and drop that in there. Those are under video surveillance. They're emptied every day by a bipartisan team. Again, everything in elections is bipartisan, and it feels like in Washington, Republicans and Democrats can't agree what day of the week it is, but at the county Board of Elections, everything is done in a bipartisan team. So every day, a Republican and a Democrat go out together to empty that box and make sure that everything's brought inside so that those absentee ballots can begin being processed. And so that's another way to do it. It's never been that way before in Ohio. This is the first election ever in a general election where we've had that available so that everybody can do that. And some boards of elections, and this is a really cool idea, and I love to see this, are setting up drive-through drop-offs for those people that don't want to mail it for whatever reason. They decide to go downtown and drop it off at the Board of Elections. They're going out and setting up a thing in the parking lot with cones where people can drive through and drop off their ballot. And so a lot of good ways to return your absentee ballot, but absentee voting is a great way to go, and we're seeing record numbers this year.
Speaking of record numbers, I understand that you have a challenge with that state up north as far as the numbers are concerned.
I do.
So tell us more about that.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. So Jocelyn Benson is the Michigan Secretary of State, and she's a Democrat from Michigan. I'm a Republican from Ohio. You would think, how could these two agree on anything? But actually, we've got a great friendship and a great partnership on working on things related to elections. And early last year, Jocelyn and I, Secretary Benson and I, made a bet. And you'd think, when Ohio and Michigan are betting, that may have something to do with what happens on the football field. But as I've been saying, that's gotten predictable. Ohio State's been dominant in that series. So we're not betting on the football game. We're betting on what happens in the election as it relates to voter turnout. Now, this has actually been a close contest over the years. If you look between Ohio and Michigan, we've had a very tight contest over the years as far as which state has a higher voter turnout. But here's what I believe. The patriotic, civic-minded, smart, engaged people of Ohio are going to turn out in much larger numbers than the state of Michigan. And when they do, when we have a higher voter turnout than Michigan does, the Michigan Secretary of State is going to have to wear scarlet and gray and sing the Buckeye fight song for the big game, which thankfully now will be happening in December, it looks like.
Yeah, it looks like he'll be wearing that scarlet and gray. I'm sure.
Let's not imagine the alternative. And please, Ohio, get out and vote, because I don't ever want to be seen in blue and yellow for the big game.
Now, see, I don't hang out in barbershops much anymore, but I understand that you've been going to some barbershops. Styling for Democracy. How did that all come about? And tell us what is it?
Yeah, so we started trying to come up with ideas early on this year because we knew that voter registration was going to be harder than usual with the pandemic and everything. So we came up with a couple cool ideas. You may see some beer bottles back there. It's not because I've been drinking on the job. In fact, I'm going to show you one of these. This is one of the ideas that we had, was to work with the craft brewers. So over 50 craft breweries around Ohio, we're all throughout the month of September, we're selling their beers in a bottle that looks just like this, where it says every vote counts. It says a collaboration brewed to encourage voter registration. And on the back is information about how to get registered to vote, what website to go to, and everything else. So that was one of the cool ideas. We also worked with Ohio high schools, where we sent over 100,000 voter registration forms back in the spring. So every high school senior before graduation would get one of those to tell them how to get registered. We wanted to find other ways to reach Ohio's communities, particularly Ohio's minority communities. And this is an idea that our team came up with. And Zach Reed, who our friend, was leading the charge on this, a great member of our team. And this was called Styling for Democracy, Now Vote. And here's what I love about this. Barbershops and beauty salons are places where people talk politics. That's as old as time. People gather and they debate the issues and have a great dialogue about how things are going in their community and in their state. And so we said, why not reach people right there at the barbershop and the beauty salon? And so we launched this program called Styling for Democracy, Now Vote. And over 100 barbershops and beauty salons around the state had this big poster that we made, and they would set up a table. It would have voter registration forms, absentee ballot request forms. It would also have information about how to sign up to be a poll worker, and it worked amazingly. I was out at a barbershop here in Columbus called A Cut Above the Rest, where Al, the barbershop owner, has gotten over 2,000 voter registrations right there at his barbershop. Now, of course, the time for voter registrations is past. That ended on October 5th. But Al had, every time there wasn't somebody in the chair, he would step out front, out on the sidewalk in front of his barbershop with his clipboard, and he would be out there getting people registered to vote. Right there in Cleveland, out on the west side of town, near west side of town, I was at Urban Cuts with Waverly Willis, who's a barber up there, and he had other barbers that he brought into his barbershop that day to train them on how to do voter registration. And so here's the cool thing. We wanted to get as many people registered to vote as we can, and it worked. In Ohio, just a couple weeks ago at this point, we went over 8 million registered voters. That's a really cool thing. And the fact that we have that many registered voters in Ohio tells me that Ohioans are excited to be a part of this election, and that's nothing but good news.
Last question. More than a vote that LeBron James, another Ohio person
Uh-huh.
that's involved with.
From my hometown of Akron. We're so proud of
Oh,
it.
for your hometown. How has that helped with this whole process?
So it's really great to see professional athletes, other folks that are notable leaders in the community, celebrities, and that kind of thing are engaging and using their voice, because I think we know that folks like that, what happens on the court or what happens on the field is so important, but their voice in the community as a leader and a good example is so important as well. And I tell you, there aren't any better examples of that than Akron's own LeBron James. One of the things that he started was this thing called More Than a Vote, and the idea was to work in a nonpartisan way to encourage people to get registered and to make their voice heard. And I was proud to be asked to serve on the advisory council for that. What we've seen as a result of that collaboration and many others, we did an event just a couple weeks ago with the Cleveland Cavaliers where I was up there at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, and we had folks coming through and getting registered to vote. In fact, the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections is going to use the lobby there at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse as a voting location this year. It's ADA accessible. It's a big open space, and that's a really cool thing. We've seen professional athletes getting involved in encouraging people to be poll workers. In fact, I've even heard that a couple had volunteered to sign up as poll workers themselves. And so all this kind of stuff is amazing, but let's not let this energy end this year, right? Everybody's excited because it's a presidential election. That tends to get people fired up, and that's awesome. But remember, next year there are important elections as well, and the year after that, and we can't take for granted those local elections, because that's where decisions that really impact our lives are made. I mean, it matters who lives at the White House, but what matters just as much or maybe more is who works at the courthouse or the state house. I mean, those are the kind, or the schoolhouse for that matter, when we have these school board elections. So it's so important that people get involved. And so I want to see this energy continue. I want to see Ohioans that maybe try absentee voting for the first time this year and realize, hey, this is a cool way to make my voice heard, and continue doing it every year. I want to see Ohioans that sign up to be a poll worker for the first time this year by going to voteohio.gov and signing up to work the polls on election day and make that a lifelong habit. There's a lot of good things that can come out of this experience, even though obviously we're living through a very challenging time.